Hey friends, today I'll be doing a long-winded presentation on Destiny 2, where we're at and where we can go in regards to the recent layoffs. I like the slideshow format because it makes the viewer easier to follow along with what I'm saying and not tunnel vision with one part of what I said and instead keep the whole conversation in context. So moving forward, the obvious. Layoffs are unfortunate, and my heart goes out to those devs. I hope they land back on their feet quickly and find a new place that appreciates their talents and values. I don't really have enough information to speculate on potential malicious reasons for the layoffs, so instead, I'll just do my best to speak about the game and not the company's recent decision. So, opening notes for this, and by the way, these were originally my closing notes, but I felt that they were so important that I moved them all the way to the top. So, Destiny, despite all of its flaws, is still one of my favorite games, and I don't plan to stop playing it as a daily driver. I typically excel as a content creator when, ironically, Destiny has less content available, and we just got an extension on Destiny's season. Hasn't been announced yet, but I'm sure they will announce it at some point. So, yes, expect more creative content from me because I like doing that. In this video, I want to apologize if I reach too far with my ideas and my speculations about where the game can go, of course. And I want to specifically say to my community not to harass or dogpile Bungie, former devs, community members, and your fellow players. Be better and think of a more constructive way to channel your negative feelings when your favorite pastime is no longer your favorite pastime. Again, while the layoffs are unfortunate, this should be a wake-up call to learn from mistakes and move forward into brighter days, myself included here. I have not done the best job over the years as a community member, content creator, or player. I will always take the opportunity to provide any feedback if Bungie asks for it directly. So right now, although Season 22 was a very, very strong season compared to recent ones, 2023 for gaming at large is a stacked year, and they all vie for our time and attention. Season 22 aside, when a new subpar expansion like Lightfall releases, I can't help but wonder if there's a complacency with under delivery. In that lens, I'm not surprised when I see a figure like below 45% projected earnings pop up on the Twitter feed all day. I'll list a few pain points right now so you can get the ideas flowing at the top of mind. We have the new player experience, monkey's paw responses to common critiques, power creep, sunsetting solutions in the content treadmill, planned depreciation of new activities and time gates, and a solved, shallow, and narrow gameplay meta on all sides of the game. This almost goes without saying, but I want to say it. I think the best way to provide feedback is to speak about it like you're a patient telling the doctor how you feel rather than the prescription that they need to prescribe to you. So the goal for today's video will be more of a retrospective combined with predictions about the future with some light feedback sprinkled in. But as I continued to type this, it kind of deviated from that. So I'm going to try to play the part of an armchair dev and game director as respectfully as possible. And don't mistake this with me assuming that the job is easy, obvious, or without hurdles we aren't aware of. However, I feel the community has hit arguably the lowest point in Destiny history, so I'm making an exception to how much I reach in this video. But first I need to set the stage, establish some definitions about Destiny, and introduce myself to new viewers. What kind of player slash content creator am I? If we're talking the range of player archetypes that exist, from the casual novice to the invested expert, well, I'm on a small island that is beyond what most consider a hardcore player, and I stay competitively up to date with all facets of the game. And yeah, that's a lot of hours. Keep in mind I have a lot of alt accounts that I run for specific purposes and to stay anonymous. Game's way more fun when people can't see your name. I didn't even put streamer mode in here. Moving on. Here are some hard pills to swallow about Destiny in its current form. The game is wide-reaching, but shallow. It appeals to multiple subgenres of FPS, MMO, RPG, looter, etc. It appeals to multiple player archetypes, again, casual, hardcores, everything in between. It tries not to be too specific for either and struggles to separate focus per activity and instead makes a homogeneous experience that most can approach, but not all can find fun with. It is a live service game which has the potential to change direction and focus away from what initially made you like the game in the first place. Experiential FOMO is a driver for player engagement, An example is like being there when Lorentz Driver was incredibly overpowered with the wall hacks and the one-hit capabilities and the aim assist where you didn't even have to touch the controller to get a headshot, and it would also body shot with the perk. And then you also don't know how long it's going to last in that state, so you feel compelled to log into the game so that you can experience it, which is why I call it experiential FOMO. And that was an unintentional pun, that was just a really good example. Next thing is, new additions to the game are not always permanent additions, nor are they always expanded upon or planned to be expanded upon. While the last two seasonal activities were significantly better, and I am going to mention that and give them credit, they were better, most are built to be destroyed. They have less substance and are not iterated on enough and missing key elements of what drives a player to enjoy it. Loot, difficulty, variance, and novelty. A lot of the seasonal activities are just waiting at a spawner door, throwing a grenade, and looking at something on your other monitor to keep you engaged. They're basically more time sinks than fleshed out activities. Let's start with the hottest topic I see on Twitter and comment sections and almost any time I stream grinding PvE. This is absolutely the most common complaint I see. These players need significantly more powerful gear to incentivize engagement. While side grades should be more appealing, a player needs to be in tune with the meta to recognize where gear can specialize. Most players are not endgame players, that's another hard pill to swallow. When Destiny creates stronger gear with guaranteed paths of acquisition, this archetype of player stops engaging when the well of powerful gear runs dry. AKA, they do their raids until they get their crafted weapon, and then they bounce and go play something else. I think that's fine to a degree. Let's take a look at this chart here. This is the raid engagement of Deepstone Crypt, and you can see on screen where it starts and people sort of get their gear, and it wanes off as we get new raid experiences. Then you can see when crafting was added, and then when the reprise version was in there. So is this pattern sustainable? The pattern is basically, it's a new activity which features stronger gear, players obtain the stronger gear and engagement falls off, it waits about a year or two, then they re-release the activity with a slight variation and better gear, then player engagement falls off again after they acquire the new version, and then the cycle repeats with something else in Destiny until I assume we're a decade later where they're going to do a 4.0 version of this Deepstone Crypt. So, not indefinitely. Obviously, it's not sustainable, but it really just depends on where Bungie wants to end Destiny 2. If only a few years out, then this pattern's easily sustainable. If they have aspirations for another decade of content, though, I anticipate players not liking where power creep will force the baseline relative power level of builds to be. So what is power creep? It's when newer items that are more powerful to entice players to participate in acquiring the loot. And over time, the relative power scaling of items rise. Like we can see here, a blue hand cannon, one less perk than a purple hand cannon. Then we have stronger base stats, better perks, the addition of an origin trait, adept, enhanced traits over time. A side grade is something that's almost as powerful, but it fulfills a different purpose or has a different specific reason to use it. Like, for example, this Cantata hand cannon is arc and has unflinching. This palindrome's void but has higher base stats. This could lead to bloat, where so many new items are added that devs have to test interactions with old items, and the more things that there are in the future, the more combinations they have to test, and it could take potentially longer to go through everything. This is what power creep looks like from a Dragon Ball Z perspective, if it helps you imagine it in Destiny. At a certain point with power creep, we got so powerful that the only way PvE enemies could kill us is by knocking us off the cliff. Otherwise, we had so much damage resistance, it was just impossible to do anything. And we're pretty much back there. This was a couple years ago. So what is sunsetting? This was the solution to power creep, and it's by means of making previously obtained gear unusable in modern content. In concept, it was always a good idea considering the alternatives and limitations, but in execution though, it severely invalidated a player's time investment and by proxy, a player's motivation to stay invested in the game. Other video games solve this dilemma with any of the following. A player trading system, where current good gear helps acquire currency and items to later trade for future gear when the current set is unusable. Then there's a seasonal server, and perhaps an all-time server. This is more evergreen and includes all the items ever, or maybe that season specifically. A sequel to the game, alternative formats, a ban list like in Yu-Gi-Oh, power limits and or economy systems. In terms of why you would play Destiny, I feel like it falls into two camps, an extrinsic reason or an intrinsic reason, and to be clear, it's okay to be either of these or both of these. I don't think the game does a really good job of appealing to both at the same time. Let's go with extrinsic. What does extrinsic mean? It means that the rewards are generally primary to enjoyment. You always want better and stronger loot or gear. You always want another pull at the slot machine. You like to checkmark a box or complete a chore. You like making the number go up, perhaps for a cosmetic flex. Intrinsic is when the rewards are generally secondary to enjoyment. You find fun in alternative builds regardless of its strength, and you enjoy playing to improve skill to afford more competitive options. This brings us to random rolls versus crafting. Random rolls of gear can create an improbable opportunity to have a specific build. However, the unpredictable nature makes completing activities for rewards more exciting because the next run could be the one where you're rewarded. It could also lead to imbalance in competitive areas, so that's worth mentioning. By contrast, the current version of crafting provides a guaranteed end goal of acquiring a specific build. However, the predictable nature leaves only the quality of the activity left to be judged. Let's talk about how crafting was supposed to be a better compromise of intrinsic, extrinsic player types than what it really released like back then. So this is taking away from one of my previous slides. So if you're seeing this again, this is why. The cons of crafting in its current implementation. It's at odds with the looter shooter genre. We just kind of went over that. It ruins the eternal chase for the god roll. Activities are reworked to drip feed crafting materials and progress with red boxes. This can lead to frustration trying to obtain a full weapon pattern from these artificial time gates. There's no/little forward progress outside of seasonal activities in most cases. Enhanced perks, this is the most important one. Enhanced perks ruin the value of random rolls and adept weapons. There's more material items to keep track of and less incentive to recomplete activities. Pros in its current implementation. It curbs RNG and is sometimes a guaranteed path to specific loot acquisition. There's less incentive to recomplete boring activities. You just wait 5 weeks and then you start your seasonal grind because you can just grab all 5 of your patterns at once. It's a new player-friendly gearing path with less fear of missing out. I actually really love this for my new player friends. I just give them a list of what they need, exact perks, and then we game together like a week later. It's a cosmetic flex for a crafted date, kill counter, and memento shader. It saves on vault space. You could just recraft with the normal perks when you need the weapon, and I do this a lot for Grandmaster Nightfalls when I'm running an off-meta build. I'll just choose to recraft like a Strand Auto Rifle or something like that. And it's easier to test new builds and ideas, like when I'm wondering, back to that bloat slide, if new interactions work with old things, and I want to know right then. What makes a good crafting system? Number 1, it creates a purpose to engage with all content. Number 2, a deterministic endpoint and or bad luck protection. And 3, it enables specific build crafting for a cost. So let's put crafting and sunsetting together. I truly believe that there could have been a future where crafting was harmoniously implemented alongside yearly sunsetting and massive content drops. The key word is massive, because if most builds/playstyles went extinct overnight, it would be difficult to convince a player to feel a sense of permanence in their game experience. The idea would be to subtly reset the relative power level without making crowd favorite builds unrecognizable. Crafting would also have to allow for random rolls to always be valuable. Simply allowing random rolls to enhance perks would be a reasonable start in today's implementation of crafting. If you wanted to go further, you could give them like shiny cosmetics for randoms or something like that, just to set apart that you did the random version or you got lucky. Can sunsetting still happen? Yes. I think these factors would contribute to it landing better this time. Number 1, again, massive content drops. Number 2, every item has some craftable and or reobtainable form. 3, manage power creep effectively rather than rotate a new overused gimmick each season. Some semblance of balance is paramount to endgame feeling good. Number 4, evergreen areas need to be significantly updated, meaning places where older gear can be used. This can also be in tandem with alternative formats that rotate both in and out old and newer gear. This helps alleviate fear of missing out because you can go get the evergreen stuff whenever you really want to. Number 5, less rotators and time gating. Instead, you could maybe do a daily/weekly bonus, and that could help. I had a situation last week where a friend is like, I want to do all these activities, and they listed like 10 activities, and I told them none of those are in this weekly rotation. They go, I'll see you next week. Number 6, flat difficulty options. For example, easy, legend, grandmaster, contest, and a power level option. Offer a bonus to choosing to participate in the power level chores, because a common complaint I've been getting is people like the old power level system because it meant that their friends list was more filled at the beginning of a season, and their clanmates would want to run activities just to make the power level go up, and it felt like they had more community contribution. So this could be a nice compromise. For all of this to matter, though, we still have to have new players joining each season without feeling overwhelmed, which brings us to the new player experience. When you show a new friend Destiny 2, what do you even tell them to buy? Can anybody at Bungie tell me what is optimal to buy? If anything, I feel like I'm the authority on this subject because I don't even buy anything. I just make free-to-play accounts and min-max them as hard as I can until they're better or equal to a paid player. It takes a long time to do it, but it's a fun challenge to overcome. The answer is they shouldn't have to deal with any of this. There should be 1 or 2 very clear options on what you're getting and less nickel and diming. So a new player logs in. Where do they go? I know that they probably have less planets and stuff like that on their screen, but just assuming you're a new player and bumbling about, where do you go? What do you do when your inventory starts filling up? How do you do it? What's the strategy? Well, if they knew anything, they would just use Well of Radiance. What are all these things in my inventory? What do I do with them? What's valuable? If I use this now, is it going to screw me over in the future? I feel like the Guardian rank implementation was a decent tutorial system. It's definitely a good starter. I think I'd talk about this here. Yeah, in concept, Guardian ranks can simultaneously act as a tutorial for newer players and a credibility check for endgame players. In parentheses here, I didn't put it, don't be toxic. While it's an okay first attempt at this system, the tutorial needs to be more expansive to help assist new players when acclimating to the game. This could involve embedded video examples, hands-on missions, curated example builds, etc. So further improvements I'd like to see to the new player experience, I honestly think Guardian Ranks covers most of them, is like a future initiative or a campaign on social media or YouTube or something like that to help out newer players for a cosmetic reward. This would also include more free-to-play weekends of newer expansions so people can try it out and see if they like it in the first place. By contrast, let's talk about the endgame player experience. This is where you wait on time gates to acquire the new stuff of the season, the new build parts or stronger gear. Power creep has led to a foregone conclusion of activity completion due to stagnant strongest meta options like Well of Radiance, Invis, and Strand Titan 1-2 Punch. An endgame player is pretty much just waiting on the new contest mode raid to release and to have the enemies hit back for once. It's essentially fear of missing out of either an experience or a crucially important gear piece that they will need for a future contest raid. The really invested players will eventually pivot to Gambit and Crucible since it involves real human opponents. Despite that, they will eventually run into a similar problem in those modes of balancing issues resulting in a stagnant meta and a very linear play. Not to mention the networking and the anti-cheat as you start rising up the ranks of skill-based matchmaking. These need to be solid for the endgame to thrive. Even in PvE, nobody likes losing to networking. Nobody likes things being trivialized by forces out of their control. As specifically for cheating, it would be nice to see some consistency on enforcing bans on third-party devices like Cronus and Zim, as well as the obvious cheaters running rampant for entire weekends at a time. I will say I'm not naive enough to think that they should hit the cheater immediately, because if they know what variable to change to not get banned, they're just going to do that. So I understand why companies do ban waves, but at the same time, it's a little excessive what you see out there. So I hope that they could do better in the future. Fatigue and burnout. Old players drop off and new players aren't really sticking with it, lead to low activity populations. Low population lead to longer queues, worse networking, and a generally more defined meta since you see higher skill players left remaining. Veteran players aren't surprised anymore with the seasonal model and often feel fatigued from running the same chore for essentially the last decade. This may lead to burnout, which could have them filling spare time with other games, which could make the further pain points of Destiny that much more evident. Players basically just sit in orbit and feel aimless on what could be fun to play as they watch their friends list become less populated with each login. Does Destiny need to evolve though to keep player interest? So, it's genuinely one of my favorite games of all time. It mixes elements of Halo, Borderlands, and Phantasy Star Online. And while I still find joy in most of my play sessions, I can't speak for the whole community. The final shape is supposed to be the conclusion to the saga, but not the end of Destiny. I'm positive most players are very curious as to how the saga will pan out, so I'm not really worried about those sales numbers. But I'm not sure they're going to be optimistic about the future of Destiny, especially if the final shape misses. I would confidently say that the game needs to evolve with future iterations of Destiny, and today, this might be the crux at which we realize it's worth waiting for Destiny 3 to innovate. And I realize the magnitude of what I just said. It could be 5 years or a decade from now for that. I think it might be worth waiting. It might be worth investing in. This really is that good of a game. Destiny is more than a first-person shooter, MMO, RPG. Not even gonna explain this. It is an entire universe that can span spin-off related games and media of any kind. I did say I was going to reach in this video, so humor me while I say how cool it would be to see any of the following in my lifetime. A dedicated PvE Destiny looter shooter. A dedicated PvP Destiny arena shooter. A roguelike dungeon crawler with fan-favorite Destiny items. An expanded Gambit-style hero MOBA. A Shadowrun-esque tac shooter. That would kind of be similar to Valorant, but I feel like Destiny has such a unique sandbox that it could add to making it the best version of that. A horror game from the perspective of a lightless citizen or something like that, dealing with all the enemies of Destiny. A space battle PvP with combined arms. Think like back to the days of Star Wars Battlefront, except much more refined. Then we could go something that isn't even a game, like a Destiny anime with an original unrelated story. What makes for a fun Destiny 2 experience? In my opinion, there are 5 elements that are important. Number 1, building both far-reaching and deep. It's okay to have specific places for specific niches. Don't create activities with an intent to destroy them, expand them as needed. Number 2, a long-term plan for balancing. Incorporate systems that offer more levers to properly tune the experience in the short term too. This could be gear score limits, rotating formats, curated experiences, etc. Number 3, difficulty options can make all aspects of the gameplay matter. From a PvP standpoint, it feels wrong to have both SBMM and artificial limiters on what a player can build into simultaneously. Think about this in regards to aerial effectiveness, flinch, radar accuracy, handling, ground landing aim punch, etc. All of these hinder a higher skill ceiling, and yet skill-based matchmaking matters. So does it really matter if the best players are not interacting with the worst players? I think it's okay to have player expression. Number 4, a reward structure that should respect time investment while also keeping players on their toes about what the next reward could be. Number 5, social spaces and features need to feel social. LFG should be an intuitive part of gaming that you don't have to go out of the game to experience, but maybe if you need it more refined. How can Destiny 2.5, or whatever we call it moving on from here, or Destiny 3 in the future, evolve? Again, humor me for reaching very far here. Call me Mr. Fantastic or something. I would like to see more of a toolbox of abilities and weapons, perhaps a hotbar that allows for many cooldowns and skills to complement shooting. Rather than the stationary rocket dumps we're used to, it'd be crazy to see what high DPS could look like when it relies on complex combos that reward proper aim, spacing, blocking, or parrying, and timing in relation to consistent boss attacks. Think about your combo window and squeezing in as much DPS as possible when you realize a boss is committing to an attack pattern. That is extremely high skill, and when you finally nail that, it is one of the best feelings in gaming. I get that from so many other games, and I would love to see that in Destiny. The next thing is enemy evolution to more roaming bosses, coordinated ads, maybe bullet hell, and more action mechanics instead of solving puzzles. That doesn't mean puzzles don't have a place, though. And they would have to incorporate and expand on elemental effects in in-game combat, and this could go in tandem with a more dedicated support and magic playstyle. Then you could have former enemies as playable characters, perhaps like a Cabal class or something like that, and if needed, keep it out of PvP. I think we have learned that it's nice to have both of them work together in harmony, but typically one hurts the other way more, and it goes both ways over the years, and I don't think the community is as happy as they could be. The next thing is to focus on replayability of content and less on expendability. Think of roguelike systems, and also quality of life updates are great to the Rotator playlist, to just the Vanguard Strike playlist, to PvP day to day. That's why I log in. The new expansion's great, but those are the daily drivers. You could also have more creative player things like Forge and custom challenge modifiers. Those are great too. I want to explain the expression the monkey's paw curls, and I could go into this much deeper. We're going to keep it succinct. This expression means that you get what you want, but something horrible happens as a result of it. I can think of that feeling many times in Destiny's history. The biggest example was at the start of Destiny 2, when PvE was forced to be double primary to appease PvP balance. If somebody asked for a more balanced game, well, they technically got it, but at the expense of a more interesting one. Another example was when the flawless pool was removed in Trials in exchange for win-based matchmaking. It's like they got rid of the flawless pool, but what you got was much, much worse. And even today, what we have is slightly worse in the reward sensibility. I anticipate many fan critiques receiving a monkey's paw answer due to the game appealing to such a wide audience, not to mention, we as gamers don't know the reality of game development limitations. It's always worth it from the developer POV to double and triple check to make sure that feedback is received and understood. Unrelated but kind of related, since the whole point of making this today was about revenue, I believe that Eververse and the Bungie store have not reached their full potential yet. I'm aware that this may be because they're trying to keep a consistent theme in the Destiny universe. However, that mold's already been broken enough in the past to just consider abandoning it and completely going crazy. Examples include wizard hats for Warlock, a custom banner of War Flag for a Titan, a custom well sword for a Warlock, a candy cane arc staff for Hunter at Christmas, popular media collabs like a Hatsune Miku two-tailed fox ornament, Domino's Pizza, more finishers like the chair or the rope kick, sweaty confetti style mods, maybe sound effects, sparrow horns. The list goes on and on and on, and I'm sure my comment section could come out with even more stuff that they would throw money at the screen for. Take, for instance, this proof of concept dad rifle dad hat that I commissioned an eternity ago. If the Bungie store leaned into these type of memes, I would buy these type of things. I'd buy them for the whole family. This is so funny. I'd wear it on stream. Also, the raid apparel never misses. This brings us to the end of this presentation. Note that I could have went on much longer, but decided to call it here, and I'm happy to report I did this in one take. I had a couple slurred words and mistakes here and there, but I think I made it through it to a point where I'm not going to heavily edit this, if at all. So please leave any constructive feedback and sentiment in the comments below. Specifically, if I were a Bungie exec or somebody, I would be wondering, why do they like Destiny? Because if you want to gain some good faith back with the fans, I think that's what's most important, and you're going to run into a problem as to why I made this in the first place. People like Destiny for way too many reasons that it's hard to really focus in on. So I really do think that Destiny 2.5, evolution of that, and moving into the future for Destiny 3 and spin-offs and that type of thing, I think the Destiny community can have their cake and eat it too. I'll make a part 2 of this if necessary. Thank you all for listening and for being respectful. See ya.